Welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and we talked about FedRAMP go-to-market decisions with Jacob Berry last time. Today, we're talking about media protection. But first, we're talking about beers. Tom, what are we drinking today?
You know, I've been watching this one in the refrigerator now for weeks. So -1 for the freshness maybe, but +1 for the can design. So as a person who likes both hazy pale ales and comic books, this one's going to hit two of my favorite check marks. So this is Noob. It's made by Odd 13 Brewing. It is a hazy pale ale. So I wanted to show that. Odd 13, if we have anybody listening in the Denver area, it's in Lafayette, Colorado, which is sort of between Denver and Boulder. So if you're ever out that way, it's actually a fun little brewery. I've been there. So.
Oh, okay. Last time I was up in Boulder, I was working with a government agency that claimed they weren't controlling the weather, but based on the spy satellite they had in their front lobby, you know who you are if you're watching, I still believe they're controlling the weather. But also we have one of these giant cans. Tom, there's no way, right? This is not supposed to fit in here, right?
That's right. I mean, it may, but I wouldn't.
It may. All right. Well, I'm gonna try my best. We're opening this, right?
I thought you're yeah. I've already started pouring. I thought you were saying there's no way you're going to drink all of it. And I thought,
imagine that.
Come on.
That would be startling. What in the world?
This has a very honey appearance to it. Very hazy.
Very hazy. Very foamy, heady. Golden, I guess, would be the color that I'm going to go with here. Kind of looks like wheat. Is this a wheat-based beer, Tom?
Well, I mean, a lot of them are wheat-based, but I don't know if this one is or not, to be honest. But this is, it's got Mosaic and El Dorado hops in it. It says a rye malt. So, no, it's not wheat.
It smells kind of sweet. There's that
sweet
going
and
for
floral. I get citrus smells, so I'm going to go with mango pineapple.
Oh my God, I got citrus. Well. I got foam on my nose again.
It smells so good. I'm going to give it a taste.
Yeah, I'm going to have a go too, and we'll see what this is like. On Amnesia Lane. I remember back in the 1980s or the early 1990s, somewhere in that hazy period of time, there was a brand of beer that was literally called beer, and it was like the store's off-brand beer. It was like the most generic thing ever. That's what this reminds me of, is a powerful taste of amnesia from many, many years ago, drinking incredibly cheap beer, which was terrible then.
I don't align with your thoughts at all. This has way more character than the cheap. We called it near beer as well. So
near beer, all right.
Yeah. This has definitely got hop to it, so you taste the Mosaic hops coming through for sure. That's what gives it that citrus flavor.
There is a citrus, like a lemon peel at the end.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. What? How would you say it coats your mouth?
You know, it's not as bad as the one where I tried to brush it off my tongue.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely does invite you back, but it's not as overpowering as many sort of hazy IPAs in this general niche of the market. I think it's really good. I enjoy it.
Well, I'm going to think about this one and see if the flavor profile changes over time as we're recording here, Tom.
Well, I'm going to pour the rest of mine in the glass, so we're prepared to talk about media protection.
I wonder if I could actually fit. Ooh, you're already excited about media protection if you're trying to fit an entire beer. Oh, I did it. Cool. That way we can acknowledge how little of this I end up drinking. Tom, you mentioned it earlier. What is media protection under FedRAMP Moderate?
Yeah, I think most people will recognize the spirit of this set of controls. You know, it's really talking about, first and foremost, digital controls. So think about how you're protecting removable media, file transfer off network, insecure file transfer anywhere, those kinds of things. But it also touches on non-digital media. So this is talking about paper documents as well,
Uh-huh.
which I think probably catches some people by surprise. Certainly the first time I read it, it caught me by surprise because, hey, we are in the digital age. Why do we have printed documents still, right? But
Have you ever worked with mechanical engineers? They absolutely love their paper documents.
yeah, that's correct. I would say anybody in manufacturing has a lot of paper in general. So so it's talking about both removable digital and non-digital media. So you do have to be, you're going to get controls that seem a little wacky, like having to have your documents secured in a certain fashion as they leave secure facilities. So be prepared for that if you have that in your environment. We simply don't have that in our environment, so we can craft pretty easy controls around that.
All right. And just at a high level again, what are the main objectives of the media protection control family in the FedRAMP Moderate baseline?
Yeah, I like to think of this is the controls that have led us to DLP, data life cycle protection, right? So it's really saying, hey, do you know what data is critical in your environment? Do you know how that data can exfiltrate your network, and do you have controls around it? And are you preventing exfiltration where you don't want it?
All right, and so that covers a range of security measures, I imagine, to protect media. That could be audio, for example, like we're doing here, or video, and so on in information systems. So, how are we approaching implementing these controls within the context of FedRAMP Moderate?
Yeah, this is definitely a layered approach. So there is no one tool that solves all of this problem. So sort of foundationally and very early on in this process, you want to make sure you've categorized your data very well. The good news is when I walked into Hyperproof, that was one of the first things I looked at. We actually did have a categorization process in place. We use a tool called Google Workspace that really helps with our categorization of data. So it makes it sort of a non-brainer. But then pretty quickly you're moving to things like, how do we secure endpoints? How do we manage our mobile assets? Things like these devices right here that cause all kinds of problems, right? And then
All
again,
kinds of solutions, really, depending on your perspective.
solutions and problems. That's correct. I mean, I can't live without it. I know you probably feel the same way anymore.
Truth.
And then, as I've mentioned, there's a whole set of controls around what you do with your paper documents as well. So we have many of these things in place, but there is no one single tool. So we're talking about MDM solutions. We're talking about BIOS level prohibition of removable media, so USB locks, essentially. We're talking about DLP tools that live over top of our file structures.
All right, and the information security and cybersecurity landscape really is not static. So, how do we make sure that our media protection policies and procedures stay up to date with the evolving threat landscape?
So, just sort of the base thing you need to do is always review your policy. We put annually on most of our policies. Sometimes we've put every 2 years if we think it's okay to get away with every 2 years. But the reality is we're going to look at them every year. But we also put this caveat that we're going to be looking at it as events or security landscape changes. And so and I do say the collective we, so you're part of that, Kayne, I'm a part of it. We are watching the news cycles. We are subscribed to all sorts of news threads, right? We're getting a pretty up-to-date understanding of those changing threats, and we're implementing those changes pretty quickly. And then the final thing I'll note, just like recently we had the Rev 4 to Rev 5 change with FedRAMP. FedRAMP is updating to sort of reflect changes in the landscape as well.
Oh, and if you're
better?
well, I was going to tell our viewers, if you're interested in another series where I don't drink beer, you should tune into Kayne's Top 5 and 5 monthly, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Tom, going back to media protection, those controls often require coordination between different stakeholders like content creators, IT teams, and security personnel. How do you foster effective collaboration and communication among those groups?
Yeah, I'd say again, there's layers to that, right? We make sure that relevant stakeholders all get a copy of policy as it gets updated. So they're seeing the policy. There is training that goes along with most of this policy. So you get to understand some of the background associated with policy through training, which is, in my opinion, is pretty critical. So doesn't feel like controls coming at you for no reason. And then we are talking pretty regularly with content creators about what is and isn't appropriate. So our media team is extremely active. So we talk to media creators about how do we make sure we don't get unintended data flow out through marketing, right? So there's controls on our documentation. We talk about, is this able to be shared? Is this not able to be shared? We appropriately annotate that content so that they can know with a pretty easy check whether that can be shared or not.
All right. So I want to talk about some examples of that. And before you give an example, one that I'm reminded of from a prior company, we had a fairly detailed checklist whenever somebody took a photo in our offices. And, the HR team might want to take a photo and show, like, look at our cool corporate culture. And we had to scrub those images that they took to make sure that there was nothing proprietary or confidential or otherwise restricted that could be shown in that. Eventually, it led us to having a policy of don't take photos in this part of the area. And same thing around ensuring that guests were only allowed into certain parts of the facility so that they couldn't accidentally see something. So, Tom, what are some everyday examples of how an organization like Hyperproof might implement media protection measures in our cloud service offering?
Yeah, great question. So we are 100% virtual, so it creates both opportunity and problems. So we don't have a central capability for things like DLP, right? So we have to provide it over multiple SaaS applications in our environment. So we put DLP on both email and our primary file storage. We do things like we push out laptops pre-configured and hardened, which include USB disablement, which for anybody who's had to mess with a laptop without USB, that creates some challenges. What we do is we prevent specific removable media from working. So you can still plug in a mouse and those kinds of things.
Or a webcam, for example.
Or a webcam, for example, yeah. Which, to your point, that creates a different sort of media. So all of our media gets peer reviewed, that gets created, that is video and or audio. And through that peer review, we do ask that we check for things like, are we letting any trade secrets out? Are we accidentally spilling the beans on something that hasn't been ratified internally? Those kinds of things occur on that as well.
All right. So then what's your advice, Tom, for organizations that are just starting to implement the media protection control family as part of their FedRAMP Moderate compliance journey?
Yeah, I would say step one is categorize your data. So understand what data is in the environment, categorize it, into the normal groupings: public, private, classified, executive classified, or something similar to that. Make sure you have that well established and you have a methodology to mark data as well. And then probably the next step is understand how you're going to control in devices. If you can get those two things solved, you can usually put a tool set over top to help manage each piece of that, and you're a long way down the road. The last thing is if you're different than us and you have a office structure, you're going to want to dig in deeper than I had to, certainly, on physical paper and how are you managing, the paper. We certainly have controls around that, but we don't have the bulk of control burden, because the reality is we just don't print much off in this company.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And the other advantage, I think, Tom, of getting into data classification, and I'm assuming you also mean data labeling on the back end, is ultimately an added bonus to that is companies then can deploy data deletion or disposition or retention, depending on how, what background you come from, to actually manage the ongoing life cycle, including the deletion or disposition of those data after they're no longer used, which I see as an added bonus, mostly because, first of all, storage ain't free, and second of all, threat actors can't steal things that you've deleted. Right, Tom?
That's correct. And then lawyers will generally like it that you're not retaining data you don't need to retain anyway, right?
That's very true.
Retention and deletion is a part of this standard as well. So knowing how you want to go into that conversation ahead of time and getting some buy-off with the relative stakeholders in your organization is important.
That sounds fantastic. Well, I think we've hit enough on media protection today. So let's move to our beer reviews. Tom, I think this is. I'm gonna change my initial review well, I can't change my initial reaction to it.
So you've grown to love it, is what I think I hear you saying.
Now that could be taken out of context. Yeah, it's citrusy, I suppose, is the only thing that I really get off of this at this point. It's still the nose is inoffensive, I suppose, is how I might describe it. It's inoffensive and citrusy. It is not the worst thing that we've drank together on this show. So if I was to give it a review on a scale, it's funny that that's the standard by which praise is measured. I'm going to give this about a 4 out of 10. I think seems fair for this.
Nice. That's impressive. I'll say this. I mean, if you like this kind of beer, the hazy, citrusy IPA kind of feel, you're going to like this beer. I've certainly had better, but this is one of my favorite styles. I think that's going to surprise absolutely nobody. So I'm going to rate this pretty high. I'd probably give this a 7. This is something I could drink pretty regularly and be happy about drinking it. Something I could share on the deck with a friend as we peruse the sunset on a summer evening, you know?
You're saying you're not having your friends over to talk about FedRAMP Moderate, Tom. My goodness.
I'm not. You know, if you're ever in the area, Kayne, you're welcome. But
I think this has been one of those things as well. Friends don't make friends talk about FedRAMP Moderate outside of work.
That's right. But no, I like it.
Fantastic. Well, that's all for this month. Please do like and subscribe for more updates. And with that, we're out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.